Thank you very much to Linda and the school for inviting me and inviting me to such a distinguished panel. I really can't wait to hear what these real experts are going to say. You all came here hoping that I was going to tell you what was going to happen, but I don't know. A large part of the reason that I don't know is because they don't know. Everything is still now up in the air. So whereas 2 months ago we thought we had some notion about where this was going, at least in its very broadest outline, out of the single market, out of the customs union, a pretty hard Brexit, no longer. The agenda's become wider, but also riskier. There's some more space up at the sort of optimistic end if you are a Europeanist. There's more weight anyway down at the bottom end that it could all collapse in a heap because it's going to be so complicated and the clock is ticking. So what I'm going to talk about is, in a sense, what are the sort of some of the points in this space that we could possibly end up with and what they mean. And the first is this morning Philip Hammond said maybe we should stay in the customs union. He said for a transitional period, but the customs union is zero tariffs between the members and a common tariff round the outside. Big attraction of that is it makes it feasible to have extremely light customs regulations between the member states, move stuff very easily. There are lots of wrinkles about that I'm happy to talk about, but the basic principle is that trade costs can be pretty low. We talk about staying in the customs union. Strictly speaking, that's not true. You have to be a member of the European Union to be in the customs union, but we could negotiate a customs union between the UK and the rest of the EU. And if we did it right, it would have more or less the same effect. Problem with customs unions is, at least as strictly interpreted, only refer to goods. 80% of the British economy is services. Approaching half our trade is services. In terms of income generated, service exports to the EU are more important than goods exports to the EU, even though gross exports are lower. So services are really important. The other sort of big elephant in the room is the single market. The single market is quite different. It's what we refer to in Sussex as a regulatory union. We agree that our regulations should be harmonised or at least deemed to be equivalent. And so it concerns sort of technical standards, even more so. It concerns for goods the certification that technical standards have been met, conformity assessment. And so you can have the same standards in two countries, but then they've got to recognise each other's ability to certify that those standards have been met. All of that at the moment is handled in a very tight system in Europe, overseen essentially by the European Court of Justice. Everybody trusts it. You buy a good from Italy, you know it's been made to the same standards essentially as it would be if it had been made here. Once we drop out, even if we are members of the single market, that enforcement mechanism starts to look a little bit shakier. And when people talk about, oh, we'll have access to the single market, even if we had the identical regulations, we wouldn't have the same enforcement mechanism that we have now through the European Court of Justice. So things that we can, cooperation, points of cooperation, equilibrium in the game, that we can support in the single market with the ECJ sitting above all of this might not be feasible when the enforcement mechanism becomes a lot looser. Below those in the hierarchy is a free trade agreement. A free trade agreement could mean almost anything you want it to mean, but basically we should interpret it as zero tariffs between members and the right of members to have different tariffs relative to the rest of the world. An important element of that is it requires essentially rules of origin. If we have several countries with zero tariffs between them, where are you going to send your goods if you're exporting to that bloc? You send them to the member with the lowest tariff and transport them duty-free from there. That undermines the other members' higher tariffs. So we put a barrier in between and say, you can send the goods you produce across at zero tariffs, you can't send the goods that you import across at zero tariffs. Rules of origin, bureaucratic, sometimes we'll have border regulations to enforce them and so on. Again, a free trade agreement is just goods, so no services. It's not to do with regulatory stuff, and so it's only a small part of the equation.